Hi guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we are going to be talking with Craig Steele of Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters. We're going to be talking about the Arizona Unit 10 elk hunts, and I believe Craig has done some antelope hunts as well since we last talked to him. I want to thank you guys for listening to this podcast. I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com, the gear shop. My friend Cody Nelson is the optics manager. If you guys have any optics needs at all, binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, rangefinders, tripods, give them a call, 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can also email him at optics@gohunt.com. Also, KUIU Ultralight Hunting. KUIU gear is the gear that I wear on all my hunts. You can go to kuiu.com to find out more and to order the gear right there on the website. Also, phonescope.com. Use the JScott19 promo code. You're going to save yourself 10%. And onxmaps.com. If you go to onX Maps, use the JScott19 promo code. You can get the phone app, the onX phone app, with a 20% savings. I use that app every day for hunting and fishing and for my real estate business. It's an awesome public versus private overlays, private land versus public land overlays, the aerial, the topo, the hybrid mode, the breadcrumb feature. It's just a great app. If you don't have it, go to onxmaps.com, use the JScott19 promo code. Guys, it's going to be a fun episode here with Craig Steele. Let's get right to it. All right, guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we've got our friend Craig Steele of Exclusive Pursuits Outfitters. Craig, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Jay. How you doing, man?
Good. You just come off a Arizona Unit 10 elk season grind. Tell us about it.
Yeah, man, it was a grind. It was a kind of weird hunt as far as activity goes. We ended up all but one of our archery elk hunters killed in Unit 10. The only archery elk hunter that we didn't have kill, he ended up having to go home after 4 days for personal reasons. He had a really bad knee. But anyway, it was a weird rut. We had that fabulous antler growth late winter and spring. Seen some good bulls as far as elk antler growth, as far as size goes. But as you know, we had the worst monsoon season in Arizona's history. And that led, in our opinion, to some elk being in some not so comfortable positions, and probably psychologically and maybe biologically and a little bit of a funk as far as the rut goes. But we killed 4 bulls from 345 to 387, and we had a good hunt. We killed 4 bulls in 4 nights, so it was a fun hunt, man. But it was also kind of the elk activity was slow, and we capitalized on what we saw and killed, but the bugling was good. You know, just depends on where you were at times, and other times it wasn't so good. So it just seemed like the elk numbers were down. We think possibly because they were in unique spots because of the water situation and feed situation. They just weren't as comfortable. And then we killed a bull that was a little over 390, or he was 392 and 0.8 even on the early rifle hunt with Rebecca Miller, and that bull was just a killer bull. I think he had almost 30 inches of mass, which is kind of rare for Unit 10, and was almost 46 inches inside with 57-inch beams. So,
wow.
Was a fun, successful season, but.
Do you think there are some cows that didn't cycle, or do you figure that it will be one of these that they'll rut the first couple of weeks of October? It wouldn't surprise you if there was a lot of bugling and rutting going on late.
It wouldn't surprise us. That I think it's just going to be it feels like from everything we've seen in past experience that it's just going to be kind of a minimal rut through all the way into maybe October. I even think you might even get a couple cows that cycle in early November. It just the elk were in good shape, especially the bulls, but they definitely were not rutting like how you normally see it. I think we got trail camera pictures of about 3 or 4 bulls that were broke, but we saw one bull on the hoof that had one broken tine, and that's very rare for unit 10. And there was definitely the bull to cow ratio was good. It just with the elk numbers, they didn't seem to be out and active like they normally are. It just seemed really doled out. And my personal opinion is that there's a psychological and biological reason for it. And I always just fall back to our human nature and, women, if and what stress does. And I think there was some added stress onto the elk because when range conditions are like they are and, half the catch water is dry, I don't think the elk were able to be where they normally like to be during the rut, and I think that has impacts. I think oftentimes we jump to the conclusion that they're just going to rut just because they're fat, but I think there's, and I don't know how to judge or how to, verify it, but I think there's psychological and biological reasons that they didn't rut as hard as what they should. I think it was a resourcefulness, lack of resources that probably triggered that. Coyotes do a similar thing when they go into the breeding season and there's been studies done that when they howl and they can hear other quote unquote breeding pairs around them, the female coyote will have less pups versus when they hear less coyotes around them, less breeding pairs around them, her body will go into some sort of, I don't know if it releases some sort of chemicals or how it adapts, but she'll have a bigger set of pups or more offspring based on the resources. So I think it comes down to, it's dry out there, and there's a lack of resources, and they know that and they can feel that, and we just expect them to rut just because they had a great spring and late winter, but in their mind it's not how it's supposed to be, so that's my opinion on it.
As far as tanks, dirt tanks that normally are have a lot of water this time of year, what percentage of tanks would you say were virtually dry or dry compared to normal?
I'd say probably half the tanks started out dry during the season. And I'd say probably by this end of this next week, 75% of them are going to be dry.
So we're going those guys with the late archery tags and those guys with the late rifle tags in Unit 10, how do you think that will affect them, and how should they kind of strategize for their upcoming hunts?
It's all going to depend on what the weather does. Moving forward, if we get a lot of rain, I think that's going to change a little bit of if we get some catch water, that's going to change a little bit of how they would go about it. But as of right now, if it continues, water is going to be a very, very scarce resource. I think right now, too, there is no holdover feed other than browse feed. So they are going to be browsing on cliff rose, juniper berries, and because there is no holdover feed. There's no dry grass. There's nothing. It's probably the worst I've seen it as far as holdover feed ever. So that's going to dictate. You guys need to hunt canyons stuff where they got cliff rose, juniper berries, even more so than normal,
As far as the late archery hunt in 10, with water being a premium, I would assume, since it's fairly low tag numbers, that guys, if they could get consistent and sit water, they're probably going to have elk congregated around those water areas. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, that's going to be a huge issue, I believe. There's the storms just were, there's a couple places in Unit 10 that had some green feed, but you're talking about a couple square miles versus, 15 square miles normally. So there is going to be some pockets that have a little bit more water than other places. But it's definitely going to be one of those things that I think those guys probably should key in on as far as that goes. I'm not sure where the moon phase, so they don't really pay attention that much to that late archery hunt. One thing on the note that I believe it's going to be probably the best late elk hunt across the state, in my opinion, that we've had in years, just for the simple fact of I think there could be some more antler breakage, but as of this time, where the bulls are in way better shape as far as antler breakage goes than I've ever seen it. So
normally, right here at the end of September, going into early October, you would tell me that 75% of the bulls you're seeing are broken, and you're telling me that you've only seen just a couple.
Yep. And honestly, 3 of the bulls that I think we saw five bulls that were broken. Probably, I think 3-4 of those were all like 5-year-old bulls, I think, that were sexually frustrated. And there was only one bull that had a couple broken times that was a big, like 8-plus-year-old mature bull. The rest of the mature bulls were not broken. We killed with our buddy Tyler Hall. His bull was the fattest bull I've ever seen. Killed on the ground. He was unbelievably fat. And then Rebecca's bull, which we killed, a couple days ago, that bull with Mike Miller, and Mike does Miller Southwestern Processing, and he's like, I cannot believe how fat this bull is. And
interesting.
It's pretty crazy. There's some rutting activity for sure, but not what you hope should to be, which is a good thing for the late tag holders, and I think the early rifle tag holders too, if they can capitalize on it.
How do you think that plays out? Obviously, the worst monsoon, on record, going into next season. Here we are. We're not even through this season, but we're already talking about next season. But when you have as dry a summer as we did, when that's the majority of your precipitation up there, coming off a wet spring, wet winter, but then super dry summer, what do you see moving forward, even for next year's thinking?
So that's where I think that the elk know that. Their bodies know that. I think it's a natural thing for them, and I think that's why they're not rutting as hard. And Lee and I talked about it, and, we debated a little bit on it could be super bad, but I think the elk, they know that, for whether it's their bodies know it or they actually know it, and that's why some of these bulls or cows are not cycling, is because whether it be because they're not gorging themselves in that lush green feed all summer. I think they're toning down their activity based on the lack of resources already. So I think, I think it's too early to tell. I wish I had a crystal ball. I wish I was an elk and kind of knew exactly. But from the outside, it's like, oh yeah, it could be horrible if we don't get any rain in November and December, to kind of alleviate the catchwater problems. That's going to be an issue. It could be horrible, but I still think that there's a chance that it's not going to be horrible, even if we don't get any rain until, let's say, January. Just because I think the elk are just going to continue to be less active than what they normally would. But I don't know for sure, as you know, I think the months of, late January to, April are the biggest common factor in elk antler growth for, precipitation and nutrition in the Southwest. And so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I believe nothing that the meteorologists say because they're wrong half the time. So I guess I kind of don't have an opinion yet until probably mid-January,
Right. Okay. Also, you had some antelope hunts. How did the antelope season go?
It was, I'm not going to lie, it was rough. We killed a best buck. We killed with a bow. He was a little over 83 inches. That was a fun hunt. Rifle season, our best buck I think we ended up killing was 82 6/8 out of Unit 10. But there was, for whatever reason, across the state, I think the best buck I heard of in Unit 10 being killed was 84. And I just didn't hear or see of a lot of big bucks. It seemed like age was down, seemed like mass was down. So it was rough. I would say the elk season was way better than the antelope season. For us, it was hard to find a buck that was even 80.
Doesn't that go with, we've talked about before that on dry years, antelope seem to do really well. Having a wet winter and wet spring, does that possibly play in that maybe the bucks didn't grow up to their full potential?
Yeah, I guess it does. It does. I think some of that is also, colder, weather versus, like just a wet, kind of warmer climate during that time frame. I think wet, warmer wouldn't be bad, but colder and precipitation, I think that might not be that great for them. But the only thing I can kind of base that on is, what the Arizona Antelope Federation or whatever has their little study on their website based on Coon and Crockett bucks during wet and dry years, and just going with what we had this year. It also seemed like there was a lot less antelope. A lot less. I actually texted one of the officers I know for the Game and Fish Department and said we're about ready to drop the antelope population down to 1 buck per 100 does in Unit 10. There just was, I think they need to drastically cut those tags to about 30, which would, obviously not be good for Lee and I with Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters, but as far as that goes, would it be better for the antelope population? And just seemed like the numbers were way down. Ton of coyotes, and that's what I can tell you, and a lot of bobcats, and a lot of golden eagles. So, for what it's worth.
Give us an update on Rocksteady.
So Rocksteady actually is on. We're grinding away. I'm building the business from bootstrapping it. So we've gone through a couple different versions on the bipod, basically from the start of proof of concept, prototype, which basically just kind of proves that it's basically just an initial kind of stick figure prototype. And then we did a working prototype, which I think we're about 60% there, which doesn't sound like a lot on that bipod, but considering what we were dealing with as far as trying to do with the bipod, I felt like it was a success. I was actually on the phone with the engineer and designer that's designing, my ideas, and with his mechanical and engineering background, we're hoping to have it done by Thursday of this week, but it looks like we're not going to get the machine parts back from the machine shop until next week. So hopefully by next week we'll have a prototype that it's at least 95% of what I want. I hope it's 100%, but it takes a lot longer than what you think. And I don't really care about. I'm not an engineer or anything. I just want it to function and be durable and lightweight, and how I wanted to use it as a hunter and guide. Not just. I don't care about the details. It just has to function how I expect it to function. So I'm a little bit of a hard ass when it comes to, with Josh.
A little bit?
Because he thinks about it
a little bit?
Yeah, as been designed,
so,
and
it's a little bit of an understatement.
So we're getting there. We're getting there. I'm I am a full-time guide, and gone a bunch with no damn excuse. So I'm just eventually, with Rock City Hunting Gear, I will transition over to just doing the hunts that I want to do, and hopefully grow that company and brand from my garage to a very successful company. So that's where we're at with it, Jay.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you cutting us in today and getting a little time to share with us and tell us about Unit 10. Looking forward to the rest of this fall, and it's always great talking to you. So appreciate. I want to give you a chance to let the listeners know how they can reach out to you, how they can follow along what you're doing.
Easiest way is I go by Craig Steele AZ on Instagram, on Facebook, and that's probably the easiest way. You can send me messages that way. You can email me at craigsteeleaz@gmail.com. And you can get my phone number right off of Instagram, and call me, text me, whatever. I'm pretty open about. My phone is my every source of communication. So whether you email me or direct message me or text me or call me, and I'll try to get back with you as soon as I can if you have a question about something.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. God bless.
All right, Jake. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.